Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week we're going to once again be talking about everyone's favorite Terrapin martial artist with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 4. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in November of 2011 from IDW Comics, we can see here on the cover we are shown exactly where we left off in issue number 3 with Casey and Raph being surrounded by Hob and his gang. The only problem I have with the cover here is that Raphael is clearly depicted in all of the ninja gear, including the eye mask / bandana that the turtles wear. And at this point in the story, he doesn't wear any of this because he has yet to reconnect with his family and be given these articles of ninjutsu or clothing, I suppose. And as we've seen so far in the story, he's always been depicted wearing like a hoodie and a trench coat. And that's what he had on when we last saw him at the end of issue number 3. So it doesn't really make sense to depict him in full, I guess, costume or whatever you want to call it on the cover, as he hasn't actually come across any of this stuff or been given any of it yet in the story. So there's a little bit of a continuity break. Maybe I'm nitpicking, but it just seems like an odd choice. Story: Kevin Eastman and Tom Waltz. Script: Tom Waltz. Letters. Not letters. Story: Kevin Eastman and Tom Waltz. Script: Tom Waltz. Layouts: Kevin Eastman. Art: Dan Duncan. Colors: Rhonda Pattinson. Letters: Sean Lee. Editor: Bobby Curnow. As you can see, this issue has 5 separate covers, and I only have cover A. This is because in 2011, I didn't have the budget to buy 5 issues of a comic book to make sure I got all the covers, and though it would have been cool, it was just out of reach for me at the time. Back to the story, we see that Hob feels like he's got Casey and Raph exactly where he wants them, and he starts to taunt them by saying, "Hello, little turtle." Casey asks if Raph knows who they're dealing with, and at this point, we see Hob start to be like, "Oh, don't tell me you forgot about your pal, old Hob," and then yells at him, "You didn't, did you?" And we see that Raph is pretty confused by the situation, and that Hob definitely has a better recollection of their last meeting than Raphael does. Casey then asks Raph if he knows this weirdo, and then Raph suddenly has a flood of memories emerge into his brain as he recalls the events of his and Hob's last meeting and how he was separated from the other turtles, fell into the ooze, and then slowly turned into the turtle mutant man that he is today. He then says no, but I feel like this is more an idea of, no, I can't believe it's him. But Hob takes this in another direction and thinks that Raph just doesn't remember him. And this kind of infuriates him as he states, you don't remember all those events of that night. You don't remember losing your family. You don't remember me losing my damn eye. And then we see Raph kind of realize that things are going to start going south for him and Casey pretty quick. At this point, Hob tells the rest of his gang to lay off the guns and just go with hand-to-hand and melee weapons, as he wants these two to feel every bit of the last ass kicking they're ever going to get. At this point, Casey says, "Hey, this is bad, man," as he realizes that no matter how tough he and Raph are and how well they work together, they are hopelessly outnumbered and facing off against a lot of thugs that they're not going to be able to deal with full certainty. However, Casey and Raph are unwilling to go down without a fight as we see Raph throw his trench coat off and Casey leap into the air, both of them preparing to make what may be their final stand against Hob and his gang. Meanwhile, 15 months earlier in a flashback outside of StockGen, we're once again at the scene just after the ninjas broke into StockGen Lab and tried to make off with the Turtles and Splinter and also a canister of ooze. Baxter Stockman has arrived, and at this point he's trying to get the details from Alan about what exactly the losses were and what their next course of action should be. Alan explains to him that the psychotropic serum was lost, as well as Splinter and the Turtles. Baxter asks about Splinter, and Alan tells him that's the name of the lab rat that they were using to try and complete their experiments with the psychotropic serum. At this point, Baxter starts to get a little disgusted and tells him, well, I'm not too worried about loss of the specimens, considering $20 and a trip to this pet store should be able to replace 1 rat and 4 turtles. And then he exclaims, I want to know what happened to the mutagen. I want to know what happened to the super soldier serum. Alan starts to worry a little bit as he doesn't like the tone that's being used with him. And he explains that while they were able to find and recover some of the mutagen that was on the floor of the alleyway, that it's probably a complete loss, as it's now been fully contaminated by oxygen and whatever particles are in the air and whatever was on the ground, and there's probably no salvaging any of it, to Baxter's dismay. At this point, Baxter realizes that things are pretty bad, as he exclaims that the loss of the psychotropic serum is pretty terrible in and of itself, as they're going to have to start from scratch on trying to make that again. But the mutagen was actually the bigger loss, as that was supplied directly to them by General Krang, and at great personal risk to him, and that the General is going to be really upset about losing such a vital and limited supply of mutagen, and that now he's going to have to give them more if they want the experimentation that StockGen was conducting to continue. At this point, however, Baxter's interrupted when Alan says, there is a possibility that we can still salvage the psychotropic serum. Baxter asks how, and Alan tells him that all they have to do is find Splinter and they can extract it from his blood. This, of course, throws Baxter into a fit of laughter as he states, yeah, I'm sure it's going to be real easy to find 1 rat in a city of millions of rats like New York. However, he's then interrupted by someone who says they can, and to his astonishment, he and Alan turn around to see none other than Hob, who is now fully mutated into his anthropomorphic cat form, and he states, I just want to know one thing though, does that filthy rat have to be alive when I bring him in? Meanwhile, at the closest police station, April O'Neil is giving her statement to the police about what happened, and they're honestly not buying it. They really don't believe that she encountered ninjas. She states, though, that they were in fact ninjas, that they were dressed in all black, they had masks on, they were carrying swords and throwing stars, but then realizes halfway through the sentence how stupid all of it sounds and that she scarcely believes it herself. The detective taking her statement is trying to make sure that, she's up on all the details and asks exactly how she got away from these so-called ninjas. And she says that she guesses she just got lucky, and that it was due to, them missing her with a sword. But then also when the fire alarm was pulled, the officer then asks, well, who pulled the fire alarm? And she exclaims that it was Splinter. And he asks, who's Splinter? She's like, no, not who, what? He's the lab rat, which probably is not helping her in trying to convince the police that her story is 100% accurate and legit. Meanwhile, down in the sewers, we once again get to see the happenings that are going on with Splinter and the Turtles, who are also newly mutated. As Splinter tells the Turtles to hurry, that they have to get to safety, he then explains to them that, they're going to take this opportunity to avoid capture as they've finally been reunited, and are going to vanish into the shadows as has always been their way. This, however, confuses the Turtles, and at this point, Splinter stops for a moment and says, I understand most of this doesn't make sense to you, and there's much that you have to relearn, but in the meantime, we're going to take the new names that we've been given, Michelangelo, Leonardo, and Donatello, and he then states that he is Splinter, and as before, he is their sensei and their father, and that there is much they have to do and little time to do it in, and that there are many things that they must once again learn, as he tells them that they are going to find a new home and reunite as a family and find their brother Raphael. And, this is just a single page, but the groundwork that is being laid in the dialogue on this page is going to be really, really important going forward in later issues. And it's kind of crazy looking back at this after not having read this issue for a long time, just how much they talk about in this one page that becomes incredibly relevant in later issues, and really does a pretty good job of, in a lot of ways, changing and rewriting the Turtles story from what it had always previously been. Back in the present, we're teleported back into the park where Casey and Raph are doing their best to fight off the thugs, and honestly not doing too bad a job, as they seem to be holding their own okay, even though they're really, really heavily outnumbered. They are able to take the fight to the thugs and kind of keep them at bay for the moment, but, you know, they're going to have to watch their backs because, as I said, numbers are not in their favor, and despite the fact that they seem to be more skilled at fighting, that's only going to take them so far in this battle. Casey asks Raphael if he knows who this guy is, referring to Hob, and Raph says, yeah, he's a bad memory that I forgot I had and that I'm going to have to deal with, as he finally does start to remember who exactly Hob is and what their last encounter was. However, it's at this point that unfortunately Raph is caught with a punch to the face, as Hob looks on and encourages his gang to keep softening the two of them up. As Raph tries to get his bearings back, Casey jumps in to help him out and smacks the thug across the face with a baseball bat. Then Raph grabs two other thugs and tackles them. However, before he can once again recuperate, he is smashed across the back with a crowbar, and I'm sure he still felt that despite the fact that he has a shell to protect him, as Hob looks on with a grin, telling them to soften him up real nice. Raph turns around, stares at the man with the crowbar, and says, hey, you just made a real big mistake, bud. At this point, Casey tells Raph to watch his back, but that's advice that he should have followed himself, as another one of the thugs sneaks up behind him and smashes him in the back of the head with a brick, knocking him unconscious. This is enough to distract Raphael as he sees his friend go down in a heap and wants to go to his aid, but before he can do so, Hob runs up and pistol whips him in the back of the head. Raph tries to get back to his feet, but before he can do so, Hob kicks him in the chin and then tells some of the other thugs to grab a hold of him and hold him down. He then stands over Raph and says, you know, I know I said no guns earlier before, but I can't help myself. I've got a real score to settle. Raph tells him to go to hell, but Hob says, I'm already there, and that, you know, he got away before, but it's not going to happen again, as he points the gun at Raph's head. He's about to pull the trigger when suddenly he's hit in the arm by 3 shurikens, and the gun falls out of his hand as he looks at his arm in horror. And he's told from off the panel that the only thing that's not happening tonight is him, as we see none other than Mikey, Donnie, and Leo have come to Raphael's aid at just the right moment in order to save his life, as Leo says, you know, let's do this. We then get this cool 2-page splash where we see the Turtles jumping into action, immediately starting to take out some of the gang members as Raph gets back to his feet, kicking one of the guys in the chest while he's grabbing the other one by the collar. Hob is shocked at what's happening and doesn't seem to have an answer for it, as some of his other gang members are coming in trying to help him out. Raph takes the opportunity to slam one of the thugs to the ground and then looks up pretty shocked at what he's seeing as he realizes that he's not the only turtle person running around in New York City, as his brothers start taking out other thugs. They, of course, are talking amongst themselves as they wonder if this is in fact Raphael, who they've been looking for all these months. Of course, Michelangelo says it has to be, man. I told you it was a good idea for us to come out tonight, as Raph still looks at the other 3 stunned at what they're doing. As they continue to take out more thugs, Hob starts to pick the shurikens out of his arm and is quite angry about the fact that the tide of this battle is very much turning against him. The other 3 turtles continue to fight their way through the thugs, but at this point, Hob decides that he's going to take matters into his own hands as he decides to jump Raphael from behind in one last attempt to capture him. At this point, the other turtles are a little bit worried as Don even says, "Oh my god, Hobbs gonna kill him." However, we see Leo say, "No, wait." And they realize that, Raph's not trained in any type of ninjutsu the way that they are, but he's still been able to hold his own in this fight with, pretty convincing abilities, and they believe that he can actually handle himself against Hob. Hob states that, he doesn't know why Raph's fighting and that he may as well just give up, as he has every intention of dragging both him, his brothers, and that damn rat, as he calls Splinter, back to Stockgen, and they're going to do whatever they can to extract what they need from their blood, and that all of the things they're going to do don't require them to be alive, and that they're all as good as dead. This is something that Raph does not want to hear, and it enrages him as he screams at Hob to shut up and then tells Hob, "I'll kill you." As the two of them square up, we see that Raphael is very much getting down and dirty in terms of just like how hard he's going at Hob, trying to jam a thumb into his, I guess, eye socket is what's behind the patch, as the rest of the turtles use their, well-trained skill to start dispatching the rest of the thugs. We then see the two of them rolling around as more of the turtles continue to take out more of the thugs. And at one point, Raph even grabs Hobbs' injured arm, throws it in his entire mouth, and bites down, causing him horrific pain. Raphael then mounts on top of Hob and punches him square in the jaw, and then raises his other fist as he states, "I want you dead. I'm going to kill you." And just as he's about to strike him again, Leonardo grabs his hand and says, "No, he's had enough." He then states to Raph that, he's already beaten to let it go. However, Donatello protests and says, "But Leo, Hobbs going to do this again if we allow him." And then Leonardo cuts him off and says, "No, Donnie, we've already, disobeyed our father enough tonight." Donatello tries to protest again, but Leonardo says, "No, I said we're not going to do that." And this becomes a really important point for Leonardo's character development and also pretty major story points that are going to happen in the future. At this point, Raphael looks around and tries to figure out exactly what's going on, as Leonardo tells him to take it easy, that they're brothers, and they state that, they finally found him and that they're going to take him home to their father. At this point, Casey wakes up and is obviously still a little bit lightheaded after being knocked unconscious with a brick, and says, "Wow, I must be seeing things because it looks like there's 4 of you," as he looks on at all 4 of the turtles together who are smiling back at him. Later on, as the turtles return to the sewer, we see Leonardo walk in saying, "Sensei, we're back and we've brought someone with us." At this point, we see Splinter turn around and realize who they have with him, or with them, as he says Raphael with a tear in his eyes. He approaches his son saying, "Welcome home," and then embraces him and says that now that the circle is complete, at last we can truly begin, as we see that this is the end of the story and it is to be continued. On the next page, we get a preview of the cover of issue number 5, and it looks pretty cool, and I'm sure that's not the only one, given the track record of this book. We then get into the Ninja Notes section. Honestly, none of the letters that are in this issue are really that intriguing. Most of them are just praising the creators and talking about, how much they enjoy the book, the fact that they're really happy that Kevin Eastman is involved. And there are a lot of questions asked, but funnily enough, most of the questions that people are asking in these letters actually get answered in this issue. One thing they do bring up is the release of the original Mirage Studio Ninja Turtles issues from the 80s that are going to be put into a hardback trade paper edition, which was a really cool thing that came from IDW getting the Turtles license, as prior to that, it was actually pretty difficult to get your hands on, collected editions and specifically copies of those old comics because they were in such low print runs and outrageously expensive. But this was a really good way that was very economical for new fans, or even, older fans like myself, to find a way to get their hands on all these early and original Turtle issues without having to spend a fortune to do it. And it was really cool that they did this. On the last page of the book, we see some of the last letters written in by people and also some of the page layouts that were done by Kevin Eastman. But more importantly, we get to see the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles micro series Raphael. Now, by micro series, they mean one shot, but I should point out that these are actually super cool as they fall in specific order with the mainline story, but they are also a way that's used to give more context and backstory and character development to all of the major players in this comic book, and they're really cool, and some of them are really, really just interesting in what they talk about with the origins of these characters and where they're coming from and what their motivations are. I'm not going to get too far into it because I don't want to spoil anything, but the next time we look at Ninja Turtles, instead of issue number 5, we're going to be looking at Raphael because that's the next part chronologically in the story where we're going to have to go for everything to make sense. But trust me, it's well worth it. And on the reverse inside cover, we get an advertisement for the Rocketeer from IDW. I remember these coming out and kind of thumbing through them, but not being super interested. And I might have been wrong. Maybe these were super cool, but I was never a huge Rocketeer guy. I mean, the movie's fine, but it wasn't something that I was like super into as a kid. So these comic books didn't really grab my eye, but if you happen to buy them and read them, I'd be interested to know if they were any good. And that was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 4. And I gotta be honest, I kind of forgot how good of an issue this was, simply because I hadn't read it in so long. And when I say that, I'm not necessarily directly referring to the fight between Hob and his gang and the Turtles and Casey, although there's nothing wrong with that. What's more important about this book is, like I said, the setup that it gives in a couple of pages for really important story and plot points that happen way later on down the line. And it really just puts into perspective the amount of foresight and thought that they put into this story from the very beginning, and the attention that they paid to all the little details and the continuity that they were creating in this new Turtles narrative. And in my opinion, it definitely pays off, especially later on down the line. Of course, we're going to get to those books in the future. But like I said, it really just shocked me to go back and read this story, knowing what I know now and realizing what they were talking about in this issue, where at the time of reading it originally, I had no clue what they were getting at. And it really is a fantastic job of writing, and I can't praise them enough for doing that. But then again, these are just my opinions. You may have thought this issue was terrible and that it seemed like it was just kind of a lot of action with no real story points. And if that's the case, well, that's okay, because everyone's entitled to their own opinions. And if you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.